right, what's up, everybody? Weekdays with Dhati and Angie. As promised, we are here to talk about ministry and marriage, and I have brought the number one expert in ministry and marriage in my life because
Yes.
I am married to you, and you are now with a degree.
Yes.
You are now with a degree in counseling, and and you have a heart specifically for ministry marriages. And so let's just kind of start there. Specifically, where did you,
I'm not
as
gonna look at you.
as
Okay.
as you gone through this idea of ministry and marriage, and why don't you just tell us exactly how you developed that heart, why marriage and ministry, and just start there.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting. I'm gonna answer your question. I'm not gonna look at you because every time I look at you, I feel like my eyes refocus and then I struggle. But I was just at the eye doctor, and he knew I graduated. So he's asking me about it. What are you doing with it, and what's your heart? And so I was telling him, and it was interesting his response because he said, your focus and your desire is to help people who are doing ministry. Like, don't they already have good marriages? And I was like, huh, that's the problem. Your answer was like literally what is the assumption is that they don't need, like, people who are doing ministry, who are pouring their lives out to other people, like, they're good. And so no one's really focused on them or paying attention to them. And that's just not can't be further from the truth. Because it's like, when you do pour out so much, there's a need to be attended to. And so I think people who do ministry have the desire to, make change, see change, and to just keep investing, oftentimes at their detriment. And so they look up later and they're like, wait, who are you, to their spouse, because they haven't been in that relationship, or haven't paid attention to it.
So for you personally, I mean, obviously there is a need, and I think there's a need for marriages that are in ministry, and they don't even have to be vocational ministries. There's people who are intentionally about doing ministry, pouring themselves out. Like, what in your story or your journey kind of not forced you, has cultivated that heart for you to have a specific passion for people, marriages in ministry,
Yeah.
or doing ministry?
I think, obviously I'm in a marriage that's in ministry, so I see the need, but I've also seen the brokenness that comes, and like with friends and people that we've done life with, and you find out, like, their marriage has been hurting for years, and it's like, wait, how did we not know? How did we not see this? What's going on? And there's just like a temptation to, I'm not going to say perform.
Well, I think perform. I mean, I think the temptation is to perform, because
Yeah.
oftentimes
It
you
seems
feel
like you're
this.
hiding, though, and I don't know that if you're intentionally hiding or if you just feel like you have to posture yourself a certain way. And that's what I've seen with, like, just people we've rubbed shoulders with. Just like, no, you need to confess what's going on in your heart. Like, there needs to be a realness, because you're still human.
Yeah. And I think that that's really important for us to recognize. And so this week, we're going to be with Angie all week, weekdays with Dhati and Angie for this week. And we're going to be doing every day this week, we're going to be talking about this, and I think it's really important for us to recognize the tension that we have in marriages. And, and one of the things that I think about, like, I oftentimes tell people, is it's like, I need a space where I could be a heretic, right? And ultimately, I need a space that they're not going to allow me to remain a heretic, but I need a space where I don't have to be on. And I think that's what you're talking about, is this concept of performing. It is so easy for us to feel like we have to perform. And so throughout the week, we're going to be talking about that. And today we just said, like, the need for safe spaces. That is so critical. Like, if we're going to have marriages that are healthy, to be able to go into ministry, we have to do it, because my firm belief is you cannot give what you do not have. And if we do not have healthy marriages, we will not be able to give anything to anyone. And so oftentimes I ask the question, or do we have the type of marriage that we want to see reproduced? And so what I want to do is to help frame, because we always want to help biblically and frame all this. And what we're talking about today, it is actually going to be coming from James chapter 5. James chapter 5 verses 13 all the way through 20. 13 to 20. And it's a verse that's not often applied to marriage, but I think it is so apropos when it comes to marriage. And again, this week we want to interact with you guys. And so please give us your questions, give us the things, in there so that we can interact with you on there. But James chapter 5, 13 to the end of the book. This is how James ends the book. He says, if anyone among you suffering, he should pray. Is anyone cheerful? He should sing praises. Is anyone among you sick? He should call for the elders of the church, and they are to pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. The prayer of faith will save the sick person, and the Lord will raise him up. If he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. Therefore, confess your faults one to another, so that you can pray one for another, so that you may be healed. The prayer of the righteous is very powerful in its effect. Elijah was a human being as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain. For 3 years and 6 months, it did not rain on the land. Then he prayed again, and the sky gave rain, and the land produced its fruit. My brothers and sisters, if any among you strays from the truth, and someone turns him back, let that person know that whoever turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and cover a multitude of sins. I think this is so critical. And you might think about, why is this a marriage verse? There's a few things that stand out to me. One, it just talks about the idea of the concept of like having someone to pray for you. And even though everybody on here is not elders or leaders or any of that, but it is like, where do the elders go? If they're the ones praying, where do we go to get prayer, right? Hopefully we're going to other elders, but what about other people? It's just like, oftentimes for people that are doing ministry, or the people who are the elder-like, or the people who are ministering, like leading the ministry, oftentimes don't have places to go to. And so that's why I often say, like, we need to have a space where we can be a heretic, right? So what stands out to you about that verse, when it just talks about this idea?
Well, the first part, the thing that stood out the most was the confess your sins to one another, and pray for one another so that you may be healed.
Yeah.
And, like, you think about, oh, well, wait, what if I haven't done anything wrong? Like, no, you still have sins. And it's about confession, like your lack of faith, your lack of patience, your lack of joy, like all these things can be going on. But it's so that you may be healed.
Yes.
And the healing is like what you were talking about at church yesterday, that unity. We were made to be one in marriage and in the body of Christ. We were made to be one. And anytime there's division, there's need for healing.
Yes. And I think it's really good to like even put some definitions on this, because yesterday at church we talked about like Satan's schemes, and oftentimes Satan's schemes and his methodia, his logic on how does he navigate things to take us off track, to steal, kill, and destroy us. And I know he's aiming at marriages. Satan hates unity. He hates the love. He hates like that coming together, and he has his way of scheming to try to get us off. One of the things that is important for us to understand, when we talk about having a place to confess, when we talk about confession, we talk about confession as being a willingness to endure the pain. Oh, I'm sorry. Confession is, I messed that up. Confession is a willingness to tell the truth about what's going on inside. And so we cultivate like that truthfulness, to having a safe space between us to be able to tell the truth about what's going on inside, but also to tell the truth to others, and having those spaces for me to go tell the truth, where I can be a heretic and tell the truth you know, where you can be a heretic and tell the truth. And again, it's not just about telling about the bad things. Confession is about telling the truth about what's going on inside. And so we talk about things like emotions, right? That I'm lonely, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm hurt, right? And we use things like words like that to tell the truth. And if we don't have those safe spaces, and if people don't have those safe spaces in ministry, you will eventually burn out, smother, and all that. Because again, we talk about it all the time. There is a reason why the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea, because the Jordan River goes into the Dead Sea, but the Dead Sea has no outlet to go to pour out. And so it really oftentimes has that tension. So when you are in ministry and marriage, oftentimes people are pouring their stuff into you, meaning all their hurt and their pain and their
the dumping ground.
They're dumping. But if we are not finding a place to pour out, if we don't create and cultivate those safe spaces, we will miss out, right?
And you need those times, like you need the people in your life, your spouse, as well as other people, to affirm where you're going or what you're feeling even. Because, you know, like, I'll feel guilt oftentimes when people, like yesterday at church, 4 different people asked for time. And I'm like, I want to get time with all 4 of you, but how do I make that happen? I don't want anyone to feel like I'm not wanting to get time with you. But my goodness, I still have all these things, and I just got back from out of town, and I got to do this, I got to do that. And so I'll try to either make it work and then run myself ragged, or, like you said, that confession of just being able to say out loud, like, oh, I feel so limited, I feel so inadequate, these are the requests of me, and I can't do it, and I have a lot of fear around that, and I also feel guilty because this, you know, and to have someone affirm, like, hey, you can't do that, like, that's, like, what you're saying makes sense, or, you know, just, if I leave it in of myself, then I'll feel all those things, and then convince myself that I shouldn't be, I should be able to do what everyone's asking of me.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think that is really important. And so even Edgar's asking, like, how do you guard, like, our family's heart, right? Like, specifically our wife's hearts, our children's hearts, because so much pressure that's putting on, you know, the body of Christ, that's put on you, like you said, 4 people. We just got back from a family camp, and right after coming out of family camp, it's like everything was waiting for us. So how do we protect that? And I think that's a great and important question, just like talking about, like, how do we protect, you know, our hearts? And I would say, let me just say this, I would say the first way that you protect your heart is by having a space to take your heart. I think that is far and above more than anything. Oftentimes we start about how do we protect our hearts with first guarding and creating boundaries. I think the number one thing, going back to the Dead Sea, is having a space to take your heart. Because regardless, if you don't have a place to take your stuff to, right, you are going to die. I don't care if you're taking on a little or taking on a lot. Like, if it's a drip or it's a fire hydrant, if you don't have a place to take that, you're eventually will die. And that's what it says. The Dead Sea is the Dead Sea because it has no outlet. So I think that is the most important thing. And so, like, finding a safe space to be able to take your stuff to, I think, is the number one thing.
No matter how small, too.
No matter how small.
It doesn't have to be big stuff. It doesn't have to be big stuff. It's no matter how small. You know, like, these are the temptations that I'm dealing with right now. These are the lies that I'm tempted to believe. These are the, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and so when we have that, when we have that, so talk a little bit about that, and specifically in our marriage, because we were in our marriage, like literally in our first 3 months in marriage, we were back in counseling, right? We were back in counseling because we were like, oh my goodness, like, what is going on? What is happening? Yeah. And so, and throughout, like, as we were in counseling, going back and forth, the counselor literally took his pen, sat it down, and sat back. And laughed at us. And I was like, this is not funny. This is not funny, right? We're in ministry. We're trying. We're figuring out. I have a different perspective than Angie, and Angie has a different perspective than me. And he's like, hey, you need other couples. And that was the big thing. That was the revelation. He says, because what you're going through is common.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, that was the thing. And so that's why I would say the most important thing is to recognize that we need a space to make sure that we are able to pour out. And so ever since, we have always been intentional about making sure that we have spaces that we can go to, that we're cultivating friendships, we're cultivating people, and that we are not going to do this alone. And so, Edgar, I would just say you got to do that. And you know, and I think about it in terms of rings, right? You personally, then you got to think about your marriage, then you got to think about your nuclear family. And I think in everyone, so you are talking about your family's heart, your wife's heart, your children's heart. In every area, in every situation, you need to make sure that you are cultivating space for them to be able to share, to not have to feel like they perform. And I think that that is critical.
I was thinking about that in terms of the kids. We've had times where, we've cultivated their life to where even though we don't have, we do have blood family here now, but the kids have family here that they know are safe places, and they've even asked me before, like, is this person safe to go talk to about whatever I need to talk to? And I'm like, yes, you know, like, you can talk to them. So they're aware that, you know, like, we've provided, we've modeled, we've allowed the opportunity for vulnerability, for connectivity, and, you know, even the kids know, like, hey, I feel like this person's talking about us. I heard it. Or this person said something negative about Daddy, and I overheard it. And this person, you know, and it's like, I'm so sorry, guys. But they know who the safe people are at the same time. And not to say that, you know, there's completely safe and unsafe, but they know who they can be vulnerable with.
Yeah, we got mail dropped off. Thank you. Yeah, and being able, and that was something that we cultivated. We sought off. We sought after. We didn't just like hope that for the best, but we went intentionally said, hey kids, here's a safe person, here's a safe space. Like, because there's certain times they don't even want to talk to us.
Nope.
Right? And we're not the safe space.
Not certain times.
Right? A lot of times, not certain times. But really, it's the aberration when they actually come to us, right? But we're okay with that. I mean, we would love for our kids to come to us, but they're teenagers, right? And teenagers are just not going to do that. So, but thankfully, we knew that we couldn't be their end all be all. So we intentionally cultivated those safe spaces so that they can have spaces to do that. And so in the same way that we were vigilant for them, you need to be vigilant in your marriage. Because here's the thing, the most important relationship that you can give, and even in parenting your kids, is this relationship. Is security in this relationship. Because think about it, even growing up, like if you went through parents with divorce and all that, think about how uncertain that made you feel, right? But when your parents were secure and they knew that they loved one another, think about how important and secure that made you feel as a child. And I think that's the same thing. And so many times we've told our kids that this is the most important relationship, and we got to make sure that there's security here so that you know that there's security within our family, right? And I think that that is really, really important for us as we are like engaging, you know, in that. And so, and this is why, again, when we talk about in James, when he says, if anyone among you is suffering, right? And just like the doctor earlier was saying to her, is it's like people that are in ministry, there's an expectation that you are not suffering, that you do not struggle, that we got it perfectly. And that is just one of that will cultivate performance.
Yes.
Right? The performance that you talked about. And you know, because you feel like, where do I go? Like, and I think that is the case. Like, oftentimes, and if you fall into that performance trap, you are putting your marriage at jeopardy. You are putting your marriage at jeopardy. And it's just like, and so we want to plead with you not to do that. And so throughout this week, we want to just engage with you. Again, hopefully this will be an interactive time that you guys can put questions. What are some things around marriage? Today we want to talk about safety, right? In cultivating a safe space. But what are some other topics that you guys want to talk about with marriage? Angie is now a certified counselor you know, and for some of us, and specializing with marriages in ministry. So if you are a ministry marriage and you need someone to kind of walk with you, you know, she provides that opportunity. And so, you know, so this is all different types of ways that we want to connect. We want to be a benefit to the body of Christ, especially to those that are seeking to cultivate a healthy marriage in ministry, because oftentimes I feel like we got to choose one. Either got to have a healthy marriage or we got to be in ministry.
It does seem like that, doesn't it?
Right? And it's like I got to cultivate one or the other, but it's just like I don't think God calls us to do one or the other, but he calls us to do both.
Yeah.
Right? And I just think that, but it is hard, and oftentimes we don't have safe spaces to actually process those things with. And so we want to be that space for you. We want to be able to answer questions for you. And then also, what are some other ways that they can get in contact with you if they were just like, hey, I don't feel comfortable with doing this online, but I would love to talk about this with my, you know, with you individually or with you and with their spouse. How to do that?
Is it on the website?
Hopefully.
Is my information on the website? Can I put it in the? I
Yeah.
can put my email.
Put it in the
in
chat.
the comments.
This is her
And
email.
then hopefully it's on the website too. I can check into that.
So yeah, so here's her information on. You can just email her directly. But I just really think it's really important. It's important for us to have healthy marriage, because here's the thing: you cannot give what you do not have,
Yeah.
right? And if we're going to cultivate health, right, then we have to make sure that we are intentionally seeking safe spaces that where we can process. And I hate to keep beating that drum, but that is the key, right? And so before we go, like, what are some ways, even in the chat or even Angie, what are some ways where safety can
Be cultivated.
be cultivated? Some ways that safety can be cultivated, and what are some ways that it can be hindered?
Cultivated. I think the way that you cultivate safety for me is when you ask me things like, hey, where are you at? How are you feeling? What's going on? What's in your heart? Like those type of questions. When I share, like when I can be vulnerable and you don't get alarmed, try to fix it, go on a like, well, you shouldn't have or you know, like those type of responses.
Mm-hmm.
But when you respond with just the, wow, that sounds really scary, or what do you need? Like those type of responses
I love
are
that.
so much more inviting, and then I'm much more apt to come back.
And let me let's talk about that, because I want you guys to hear what it says. She says spaces where I don't get big or, you know, alarmed, but also spaces where I don't try to fix her.
Yeah.
And I think and I don't do well all the time because I am a natural fixer, right?
You are a fixer.
But
you
know,
do so much better than me.
yes, but go ahead.
Just coming home and saying something, even as yesterday, like, oh my gosh, I feel so limited. I can't meet with all these people. Your response could be something like, did something happen?
Just keep going.
Okay. Your response could be something like, well, you could meet with them on Tuesday, and then we can free you up on Wednesday to meet with this person. That's not what I need.
Yeah.
I need to hear, like, hey, that does sound like a lot. And that's
Right.
probably really scary for you to know that these people want your time, and for you to not feel like you can give that. Like, what do you need from me? Or is there any way that I can help? Or, you know, like, I don't know, just that.
Yeah,
Not fixing.
And so
you know?
when we talk, one of the things that we do in the master class, Known 360, on the city syllabus on My Boulevard, we say, we talked about how do we help people to identify, explore, and express. And one of those things that what's a discipline that we constantly do is it's like, we ask the question, where are you?
Yeah.
Right? The first question that God asked Adam was, when sin entered into the world, was, where are you? Right? And then the response, how do we respond to one another? What do we do? We respond with, I feel and I need. I'm lonely, I'm sad, I'm angry, and I need this. And so part of this is that I do not try to fix you unless you say that you need something.
Like,
now,
I need guidance.
like I need guidance. Yeah. So otherwise, I'm just like, hey, what do you feel? And if you say I'm lonely and I'm sad, my natural tendency is, well, you're lonely? Well, what about, I went on a walk with you, we did this, we did that, and I started listing out a resume of all the stuff that I've done to make us like, why, basically asking the question, why are you lonely? And I just want you guys to know, has that ever been effective?
It's not.
It has never been effective whenever you start listing your resume on and basically telling someone why they do not need to feel
Or you didn't even
that
ask
the way that they
question,
feel.
Are you lonely for me?
Yeah.
Are you lonely for time with me? Are you lonely time, you know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't even, if you start responding that way, you haven't even really heard the heart, because you don't even know where the loneliness lies.
So basically what I'm saying is two things. Don't, you know what we're saying, don't justify, right? Don't try to justify basically saying you should not feel lonely because I've done this. Basically put out your resume. Don't do that. That's never been helpful. The other thing is don't try to fix.
Yeah.
All right, well, because here's the other thing that I do. Oh, you're lonely? All right, so tonight we'll do this, tomorrow we'll do that, and then basically for the next 3 or 4 days, I just promise the world, and then don't end up.
You can't meet it.
I don't meet the promises, because like in the moment I was just like, really what I'm saying is I don't want you to be lonely, so let me fix the situation, let me do whatever I need to do, but it doesn't create a sustainable rhythm and a sustainable practice, and ultimately it may not even be what
As I was
you
about to say,
need.
oftentimes if you just said, I don't want you to be lonely, well, you know, I'm just like, oh, good. You already feel less lonely when someone responds with empathy. Loretta's asking a good question.
So just being with you. What is Loretta's question?
Well, she said, you know, you guys have a lot of kids, and they've got a lot of kids, and between newborn and 5, yeah, that's a lot.
Don't get a lot of time. Okay. Yeah.
Like, how do you cultivate this time when you have so many little distractions running around?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a bedtime.
Right.
Bedtime, make their bedtime as early as possible is a practical.
Bedtime as early as possible, but I also think one of the things that we cultivated when we had kids, and we had 6 under the age of 6.
We still have kids.
Yeah, right. So I'm talking about the kids that was kids.
Yeah.
6 under the age of 6. Now we have teenagers, and they would say adults. But and I think one of the things that we do is you have to cultivate discipline. So one of the things that we talked about is, again, this is about creating safe spaces. And one of the things that we used to do, like when I came home, we would tell our kids, hey, mom and dad are going to spend the next 15 minutes, and it's just going to be us two. Whatever you have to do in these 15 minutes, go do it. And that may be, if it's Xbox or whatever it is that can cultivate that time for that, so that they're not coming in and bothering you. Just like mom and dad.
Bribing the older ones to take care of the little ones.
Yeah,
you know.
bribing, doing. But what we're communicating with them is that mom and dad time is so important. We have to make sure, in that word Angie talked about earlier, it's attuned to one another. Like, we got to make sure that we're in alignment and our hearts are in alignment before we can engage with you. And so it's prioritizing our relationship, because we says we cannot give what we do not have. And if we are not cultivating safe spaces, then we will then give out of our lack. And so this is the whole airport analogy. Put the mask over yourself first before you do it with them.
Yeah. And the kids learn that. Like, they would greet Dhati and, you know, like, hey, Daddy, you know, and then, you know, it wouldn't just be like you walk in the door.
Yeah.
Be like,
it wouldn't
get
be
away
like
from me.
stiff arm.
Yeah. But we'd do our greetings and all that, and then be like, okay, it's 15 minutes of mommy daddy time on the couch. And they would all just, you know, kind of go to their rooms and I don't know what they did for 15 minutes.
Right.
But,
and that's what we did early on.
Yeah.
For early on, we was just like, hey, we need this time. Mom and dad is not going anywhere. We'd be on the couch, right? Break glass in emergencies only. And we would basically say, if somebody's bleeding or dying, we need any other, like, we're really, really clear. But that discipline is something that we consistently cultivated. So now we're with teenagers. So we'll go on walks every single day. We'll take a walk together, and we're just letting them know, it's like, this is like, mom and dad need to make sure that we are good so that we can give the healthiest version of ourselves to you, right? And I think that's so important. So cultivating that time, Loretta, with John, and just making sure that you guys you're doing that. And I don't know what that looks like, but you gotta do it.
I think date nights also.
Yeah.
I get so grieved when I hear people say, like, we had a date night back in January, and I'm like, what? You know, that needs to be, you don't have to have money, you don't have to have, you can get really creative, but I think date nights weekly, and if not weekly, at least twice a month, are so important.
But with that, I just want to say real quick, and I'll let you finish your thought. But even if you don't have a lot of money, date nights needs to be on the priority.
It needs to be in the budget.
Right? Like in your budget, prioritize it, because again, where your money is where your heart will be. That's what, the Bible talks about that. And so cultivating your marriage and saying my marriage is a priority.
Yeah.
And so we need to cultivate. So if I need to find babysitting on a consistent basis, or if I need to swap, we've done all of that.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
We lived in Little Rock. We didn't have family. We didn't know anybody, but we made friends quickly with another family that had kids around our age. And I don't remember the day, but say we would go out on a Monday and they would watch all of our kids and their kids. And then next Monday, we'd watch all of their kids and our kids, so there was a trade-off. It didn't cost anybody any money, and then in terms of the date nights we've done where we've, just gone to the park and sat and talked,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, we're about to drop $60 at a restaurant or something like that, just time away from the house where the dishes are calling your name, the other responsibilities, you can hear the kids fighting and you feel like you need to step in, just time away.
So I think one of the things, basically what we're saying is, no matter what season or stage of life that we were in, we constantly cultivating a place to tell the truth about what's going on inside. That we were cultivating. It's not something that we was hoping that was going to come, but we cultivated that. And
no one will make that happen.
And we basically have, we've been married for 22 years, going on 22 years, and out of those 22 years, we have had people living in our home. We've had people, so all the reasons why it's been not easy to cultivate that, but we have said no matter what season, what stage, this is a priority, that we need to make sure that that we're good. And I think that is super important, because if you are not cultivating safe spaces, you will die. Again, the dead seed. And I'm not talking about die physically, but you will die emotionally. You will die. You will stop caring. You will find those things. And I think it's really important. So as a recap, and then we'll let you guys go. Again, come back, put your stuff. If there's anything we want to talk about marriage, we just want to be a blessing and to share kind of our heart. But as a recap, right, as people that are leading ministries, you have to cultivate safe spaces. That the number one thing is not even creating boundaries. The number one thing is creating safe spaces, because no matter whether you only get someone sharing with you once a year or once, if you do not have a space to take your stuff to, you will burn out, you will die out, right? And so it's so important for you to do that. So that's one. That's one thing that we have to do, that you have to create and cultivate space to tell the truth about what's going on inside. What was another takeaway that we had?
Prioritize your marriage.
Prioritize your marriage, right? We got to make sure that no matter what season of life, you are prioritizing
and
that.
Be countercultural. Don't look left and right and see what other people are doing. You've got to do what's best for you.
Yeah.
It may not make sense when you look at your peers who are like, well, we only date Valentine's and your birthday, or something like that.
Yeah. So it's basically prioritize that. And so prioritize your family. And then the other thing is the idea of, no matter what stage of life, right, cultivate the disciplines, right? And I think that is so important, that you cultivate those disciplines in order for people to do that. Because whether it's budgeting or date nights or whatever, do not allow that your marriage to go on the back burner, right? And the last one is, make sure whenever true intimacy is taking place, you don't try to fix your wife or your husband. You don't try to create your resume where you shouldn't feel this way because I did this, and that. Don't do that. It's never been helpful. I've never said that to you and you was like, you know what?
Good point, Dhati.
Good point. Man, why do I feel this way? You know what? I don't feel this way anymore. You want to go have sex? Oh, my fault. No, I mean, but it just never goes that way. It never happens that way. So it doesn't work. So don't do that, right? Don't fix. Don't create a resume, and don't basically don't feel like the world is falling apart either. Like there are no temptation that's taken us but that which is common to man.
Yeah.
So God is faithful, you guys. All right, again, so we're going to be on all the time this week, me and her, weekdays with Dhati and Angie, and we're excited about spending the time with you. And yeah, so Loretta, let us know how it goes for you, and we'll just keep it moving. All right, you guys, we love you, appreciate you. We'll see you guys again tomorrow at 10 a.m. See you tomorrow. And if there's subjects that you want to talk about, put them in the comments. Make sure you do that. Come back, put them in the comments about specifically marriage and ministry. And again, it's not have to be vocational ministry, but just people who are trying to intentionally be more live on purpose within their marriage. And so that's what we want to talk about, and that we'll be talking about throughout the week. All right, love you guys. Peace.